Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Awesome. I'm so glad to be here and to get to talk about myself and a little bit about my music.
Yes, it's gonna be great. Okay, so actually, just jumping right in, could you walk us through your musical journey? How did you get started in music? You know, why did you choose the music that you've
Yeah,
chosen to pursue?
that's a great question. I think that's something I also reflect on a lot, just because it's kind of like, whoa, like I'm here where I am now, and so it's kind of like I don't know, looking at my origin story. So I guess my origin story actually begins in like a non-traditional context in terms of like my classical training. My exposure to music was, in like a sacred capacity, like in the church. My mom sung in our church choir. My brother was like the drummer. So I was like fully immersed in like the musics of, like gospel music and like Black contemporary music and Black, gospel contemporary music, and everything's of those like of that repertoire. And so it's interesting because none of my family is like classically trained musicians, but like music has always been a part of our life in every aspect. But it was just something that like was so inherent to how we existed, and not something that we like I don't know, like we're in super intentional about it. It just like music was what we did. Um, and so when it came to like my classical training, it was like after years of like, begging my parents to like play the violin, but that was also in the phase where like I was like quitting a lot of things the moment it got hard. So obviously music's a little bit more expensive to like commit to. So my parents wanted to make sure that like, this is something I really wanted to do. And after like basically like pressuring them for 2.5 years, they eventually got me a violin for Christmas. And then I discovered I hated it. I was like, okay, maybe not the violin. Like I still want to do music. And so I picked up the trumpet in like middle school, and was in band. And I think also in middle school, but I was still like doing the violin like recreationally. And then when the orchestra directors came up to me and was like, hey, she saw this video of like me playing like Mission Impossible with my friend that played viola. And she saw that and she's like, hey, you play violin? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm signing you up for orchestra. I was like, oh, you're telling me, not asking. I was like, okay, I see. And then after that, I kind of just did like orchestra and band at the same time. I kind of became known as like, I don't know, I was a little bit of like a Frankenstein, like in terms of like my reputation in school. I was like known as the kid that did like band and orchestra. I don't know if that particularly gave me any type of like higher status. Like I definitely didn't feel it whatsoever. But yeah, so that was kind of my thing, and I continued that in high school. And but simultaneously, like while I was a performer, like writing music was always a part of my conception about like music. I remember like, when I was practicing violin, I would like stop and be like, oh, that was a cool melody. And like, like write it down in like my notation app, like MuseScore. I'm sure we all have used before. And so I would just always be like writing things down. Sometimes I would like make really bad pop arrangements of like Jason Derulo and like Katy Perry, and just like do it for like strange instrumentations like oboe, flute, and like xylophone or something like that, and just do like these strange combinations of things and kind of doing my own thing. Then eventually, from going to like really bad arrangements of other music, I just started to do like really bad arrangements of like original things that I was writing. And so what kind of, and this is like kind of the sequence of events that led to me being a composer is, I remember my orchestra director, I had I wrote a string orchestra piece, and it was just something I did. And she saw it and was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. We should play this. We sight read it. She even let me conduct. And she was like, Jaylin, if you have any more of these, like, I would love for us to read this. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. And so almost like every month I was like writing, some string ensemble piece, and we would play it. And had she not have like encouraged me to do that, I don't think I would have become like, I don't think composition would have been something that was like such a strong part of my musical experience. And so that kind of, through that avenue, like having an ensemble and like working with ensemble, that really what is kind of propelled me into the arena of composition. So Yeah, so that's a little bit of my musical journey in high school. In high school, I, played the violin and trumpet. So I was like in jazz band, did marching band, did youth orchestra. So I always like had the sounds of the instruments around me. And I think that's really what informed like my ear as a composer, not only just like working in large ensembles, but also like my curiosity about other instruments. Like I was always so curious about, the workings of the orchestra and like why the saxophone was built the way it is and like why it works that way and why that's different than a viola and why that's different than percussion or the voice. And so it's just like that curiosity that I think is so fundamental to being a composer that I think was so like intrinsically part of like my musical experience. So that was a very long-winded like origin story. But yeah, so
No,
that's
that
kind
was
of
great. That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also like it is so lovely to hear that, it, it's lovely to hear, your that you have that hunger to learn not just about one thing, but not just about one instrument or group of instruments or a certain
yeah,
instrumentation. It's really nice to hear. Like it must be. I always thought it was more fun that way, right? If you can kind of write for everything, or if you can kind of
exactly.
perform on everything. So that's awesome. And also, I'm definitely going to request that we play a Katy Perry arrangement at the upcoming concert.
As you should, as you
I
should.
am I will ask our artistic director. um so actually moving on from that and actually still talking about instruments and instrumentation. What is your favorite instrument or group of instruments to compose for and why?
That's such an interesting question, because I feel like it's almost like when you tell a parent, like ask them what your favorite child is. Like I feel like they're supposed to say, "Oh, I don't have a favorite child." So my answer is I don't have a favorite instrumentation or a favorite instrument. But I think but to like give a more satisfying answer, I think whatever piece I'm working on in that moment, that is my favorite instrument. And so this is a segue to talking about the things that I'm working on. Right now, I'm working on a piece for two percussionists and one marimba. And I've just been like immersing myself in all the repertoire of like marimbas. I can like solo Bach and just like some more, modern marimba pieces. And marimba is such a cool instrument. Genuinely is like such an interesting instrument with like it's so versatile and I just had so much fun because I'm not a percussionist, so it's been so interesting like seeing everything that that's capable of marimba. And so what I'm doing with the piece is kind of playing around with space. So with having two percussionists on like one marimba, I'm kind of playing with horizontal space in 2 dimensions, like the physical horizontal space, right, of like them going across the marimba, but then also like the melodic horizontal space. And so I'm kind of playing with that and like as the piece goes on, it starts like presents like a melodic material, and as the piece goes on, it contracts. But as it contracts horizontally, it expands vertically. And so vertically in terms of like having like denser chords and like like stacks of like seconds, fourths, fifths, and getting denser vertically that way, but then also getting denser vertically and like having like them overlapping each other, like spinning around each other, facing each other, and just like all of these different ways where like they're interacting like player to player while they're on the marimba. So it's just things like that where I kind of like immerse myself in like, okay, what's the precedent done on this instrument, and like what are some novel ways that I can kind of play around with the things that have already been kind of what's in the repertoire. So yeah, so right now, marimba is my favorite instrument. But the next piece I work on, if it's a string quartet's going to be my favorite instrumentation. If I write a piece for harmonica and like kazoo, then it's going to be harmonica and kazoo. So which honestly, I might add that to my project list. That might be a little fun project to work on. Double concerto for harmonica and kazoo. I don't know.
Listen,
We'll see.
TNM will program that. I'm not even kidding. That sounds great. I mean, that's such a great answer. And that piece sounds incredible. So there's going to be almost like a choreography element to it.
Yes.
That's going to be so
Yes.
cool to like watch and hear. Wow. When is that being premiered?
So that's being premiered in November, November 19th, for a new art, new music that is part of a concert series here at Rice University, where I attend. And it's super interesting because we get to, so the exhibit is essentially about like urban, like global conceptual, global conceptualization of metropolis and like cityscapes. And so the piece is basically talking about like vertical sprawl. Instead of like expanding outwards for growth and development, you go up. And Houston is a great example of that because the cities are becoming more dense. And so if not out, then up. And so the piece is kind of like a sonic representation of the urban development of Houston. So
That's
yeah.
incredible. That's so cool. Okay, and we'll definitely have links to that like on the website and social media and everything. So if people are in the Houston area, they can check that out. And now going back to the concert that is going to be performed Saturday, October 29th at the Devena Center in New York City. You are the winner of the Young Composer Competition Division 2 for 2022. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And your piece Shimmer for cello quartet will be performed.
Yes.
Can you tell the audience, what can we expect to hear from this piece? You don't have to give everything away, but
Yeah.
what's going to happen? What can we expect?
So I like to say that Shimmer is kind of my sonic representation of unadulterated joy. And I think it is like my way of releasing the inner child in me sonically. So it's like very bubbly, very shiny, like everything you would imagine like a young child enjoying, like just kind of like the open wonder and like curiosity that we have about the world. Shimmer is kind of like my musical way of expressing that. So it has like a lot of like these moments where it's just like, I don't know, like almost like in a dream almost. And you just like see like these lights flashing all over the place. And there's other moments where a lot more energetic and bouncy and buoyant. And there's moments where we have like the singing melody, like a child like humming, like a nursery rhyme. And so all of that inside of Shimmer. So I'm very excited for it. And I hope that, I don't know, that the piece is kind of like gives space for like listeners to also embrace their inner child. So yeah.
That sounds so great. Oh, wow. I love how you put that. That sounds awesome. And now, why did you choose cello quartet? I'm curious.
Yes, so it's a little bit of a roundabout story. So coming into university, I was my freshman year. It's like your new face. Okay, you're trying to make friends, trying to make impressions, trying to make people like you. So I 4 friends that I made very quickly were the 4 cellists in my year, and all from like different studios at Rice, at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University. But one of the cellists, my best friend Claire, she had actually come up to me and was like, Jaylin, like there's 4 cellists and everyone loves a great cello quartet. So why don't you just like write us a cello quartet? And like when you're a composer, like people come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, you should like insert random instrumentation or random instrument. It's like, I would love to play it. I'm just like, oh, that's great. But like realistically, you never really like get to it. But for some reason, like I was so entranced by this idea of like 4 cellists and like a cello quartet. And I was like, I don't know any new music rep that's like, I just don't know much, music for cello quartet. And like, the cello has like so many colors in its color palette. So I was like, why not? And I wrote the piece, and some of the material actually comes from another piece that I wrote called Sparkle. And Sparkle is kind of like the same, Sparkle with an exclamation point, I might add. And it's kind of like the same way where it's like very like poppy, very like bright, just like buoyant and optimistic. And so it takes some of my previous sketches from that piece and expands on them. And so that's kind of how Shimmer came about, just through, and it's also like a representation of like, I don't know, my excitement and just like the great time that I had my first year in college, which was specifically because of the great friends that I made with these 4, like the friendships that I made with these 4 cellists. They absolutely like are phenomenal humans and phenomenal players. and they really like made my first year at university and at conservatory one of the best and most memorable experiences of my life. And so this piece is kind of like a collaborative effort that also represents all those other things that I mentioned, but also represent our camaraderie. So yeah.
What an amazing story. What a great, oh, that's so nice. I love college. No, that's, and you're right. There isn't a lot out there for cello quartet. I was in a cello quartet once. And we did some, I don't even remember what we did, but I remember we had an issue finding stuff. So
Well,
I'm happy
listen,
to
well,
hear that
yeah.
there's now stuff out there. And I also find it interesting, because the cello does have so many colors, but it's fun to think about it in not um because I picked up the cello because I was a brooding teenager, because I was like, this is like my soul. But it's nice to hear a cello in like a more not optimistic, but a more light and
Mhm.
effervescent
Yeah.
quality. So I'm very excited to hear that. That'll be great. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So actually, you touched on this in the last question, but what or whom are you
Mhm.
inspired by in your music?
Great question. And I think that's something I reflect about a lot, reflect on. 'Cause I think as composers, like we're always like living in some sense of like existentialism. It's like, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And it's just like it's just you get real philosophical. It's part of the job, I feel like. But who inspires me, honestly, is what inspires me is like the listener, like audiences. Because I think I'm inspired by like creating an experience for like listeners and audiences that maybe they haven't heard or experienced before. But regardless of like whatever I'm writing, is that they can always take something that is so individual and so like unique to who that individual person is. Because I know a lot of like I know I've given a program for Shimmer, and like I have ideas and like what's inspired me to write Shimmer, but I really like what I love so much about music is that it's like the most intangible like art form there is, right? Like we're experiencing this wiggly air and it's like creating images and things that like we cannot like see, or like it's super complicated how we're perceiving these things and how through this we like hear a story, and it's like the most intangible art form that we can experience. And I think because of that, I think that's something that's really sacred, and that really should be protected in music. And so I never try and like have a program that is like this governing perception or governing interpretation of my music, because I honestly feel like music, and maybe my music specifically, I feel like it's a communal thing. Like it's something that I'm sharing with people. That's something that I'm like gifting to the world, something that we're sharing together. And I think what's part of that community and that collaboration is that people can take whatever message, whatever story or narrative or inspiration they want from my music, And honestly, my goal and what inspires me as a composer is that I'm not particularly interested in people liking my music. Um, like they can love it or they can absolutely hate it. But what I care about is that people feel something when they listen to my music, whether it's like something intrinsically positive or super emotional, or even it's just like, wow, that's interesting. Like as long as someone feels something when they hear my music in a concert hall or on like virtually or electronically, as long as like they're feeling something so visceral, that's I think what I really care about, like getting to the human part of the audience and the listener. So I hope that's a super abstract way of answering the question, but I think at the heart of it, that's kind of my goal and what keeps me. That's kind of like my why of being a composer. So
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. And yeah, no, because I think that there are some musicians and some composers out there who hold on to their music and say it's mine. But let's be honest, the minute that you open your mouth and sing, or the minute that you put it out there, it's no longer yours.
mhm,
Like, and
right.
it's completely and totally the audience's. So it's nice that you have that already in the back of your head as you're composing. And it's beautiful that you're thinking of them. Also, I think that you should definitely make a t-shirt that said music is just squiggly air. Um, trademark, because that's hilarious. I actually I have two more questions for you, and then we'll send you on your way. You probably have homework, college. And this one is actually not, well, it could be musical, but this is just what are you excited about in your life right now, musical or otherwise? What gets you up in the morning nowadays?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think, well, I'm so grateful that I get to do what I do. I think it's such a luxury that I get to be in a field that is predicated on collaboration, and working with people. And I think that's my favorite thing about what I do. I say that I hate composing, but I love being a composer. Because the actual composing part, like being stuck in the room, like, actually writing the music, which is like 90% of the process, like I don't enjoy that as much. But like when it's finished and I get to work with people and like I hear the music and I'm collaborating, we're like sharing ideas, that's absolutely my favorite part. And that is like what is like the bread and butter and like absolutely my favorite part of the job. Um, so in that retrospect, I think that's what gets me up. But the things that also inspire me, I really just enjoy connecting with people. And like I really value just making meaningful connections with people in any capacity. And I think that's really informed, like, the type of people I surround myself by, like the school that I chose. Just because like all of these things in my life, I the common denominator is that I love sharing things with people, and in whatever capacity that could be. I have a friend here at school. She is interested in mushrooms. She's so fascinated by mushrooms. Me, I don't even eat mushrooms on my pizza. But every time she talks about mushrooms and like fungus, it's like regardless of what it is, I feel like I am now passionate about mushrooms and fungus. And it's like just sharing like that passion, and sharing like that personal interest is like really what motivates me. And I love that through music I can do that non-verbally, but like it still speak way more than I could ever do like actually talking to someone one to one. So yeah, I think that is what gets me excited. Any opportunity I can get to speak with people and understand other people, um, I think that really is what motivates me to do what I do.
Incredible. So my last question for you is, what are you listening to right now? What is on the Spotify playlist or what have you? What are you excited about in the listening respect?
That's great. So I'm gonna admit that not to be that person, but like I listen to a lot of things. But it's like I systematically set that way because I actually have like a schedule of like the type of music I listen to. Sounds a little crazy, but like for example, like I'll tell you my schedule. Monday, Wednesday is like classical music. Most of it being centered around like 20th and 21st century. I will admit I do have a bias. But that's Monday, Wednesday. Tuesday is hip hop, R&B, and rap. Thursday is jazz in quotations, whatever you think that could be. Jazz is probably in there. Friday is the genre called AfroBeats. Saturday is my potpourri day. So I actually like literally have my friend just send me like a random playlist. And I'll just like listen to that. And then Sunday is like my contemporary gospel music. So like I'm literally it's systematically set up to where like I listen to like a wide variety of things. But to answer your question more specifically, Kendrick Lamar. I think especially on my Tuesdays, like I tend to gravitate more towards like Kendrick Lamar albums. I think Kendrick Lamar is one of my favorite artists at the moment. And I think specifically because of how his music has contributed to a lot of like the social consciousness in the Black community. I find that really inspiring, and in some retrospect, what I think in some capacity, what I think I would like my music to do and achieve. And so it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful to see like examples of that happening. And you know, there's obviously like decades of precedent, like music being like contributing like social consciousness in certain communities. But I think he's one of my flagship examples, and it's something that I always gravitate towards. So I think that's kind of what I'm listening to at the moment.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love your schedule. I think I might adopt that because
That's
sometimes, yeah, because sometimes you go into Spotify and you're just like, oh my God, like what can
exactly,
I
exactly.
listen? That's actually a really good shout. I think I'm gonna do that. Thank you
I
for
highly
sharing.
recommend it. Highly recommend it.
That's awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Well, we'll definitely do you have a specific Kendrick Lamar song that you
I think
love the most?
all
Or
right. I
album?
think, I think all right is
Okay.
my go-to. Yeah.
Cool. We'll link that.
Wonderful.
We'll link that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, Jaylin, thank you so much for talking to us,
Of
talking to me.
course.
We're excited to see you
I'm
on
excited.
the 29th of October at the Best in Score 2022 Winners Concert. Woo! That'll be at the Domena Center, 8 p.m. All the info is at tribecamusic.org. So make sure you get your tickets and say hi
Yes,
to Jaylin.
of
And
course. I
yeah,
love meeting new people.
yes, awesome. And we can't wait to meet you in person. So thank you.
Of
And
course.
we'll see you soon.
See you soon.